2 nights ago, we were sitting at our dinner table and eating dinner, and we love to talk about God and just what's happened in our life at dinner. And so I finished my meal, and I pulled out my Bible, and I read this story that I was just read to all of you. And so I said to my guys, hey girls, can you think of any other story that you've heard where there's a family that's going on vacation with a bunch of their relatives, and they leave, and then one of the kids gets left behind at home, and then once they realize it, they have to get on a plane and try and get on a plane and go back and get them? Can you think of any story like that? And they all immediately jumped down. My 2 oldest ones, Home Alone, Home Alone. They remember it. You didn't know Home Alone got its script from the story, right? And then my youngest daughter, she goes, yeah, Daddy, but that boy, he was bad. He put his hands down like this, went grrr, like he needed a spanking. I was like, you are right. You are right about that. Then I said, what about Jesus here, girls? What did Jesus do that was bad? And they stopped and they thought about it for a minute, and they said, nothing, which is right. Jesus didn't do anything bad. And then we went on to have this good discussion about what kind of kid Jesus was and what a good example he has left for us. So I'd like to do that together. So look again with me at verse 46 and 47. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. So what do we see here? A 12-year-old boy who's in this group with a bunch of guys that are teaching the Bible, and he's asking them questions and answering questions that they ask of him. Now, we talked a couple of weeks ago, and we'll talk about it a bit in our next point, that Jesus and the Bible's claim is that he was and is, in fact, God in the flesh, like we sang today, God of flesh and bone. So if Jesus is, in fact, God, then he knows everything, right? He's omniscient. He knows all things as God. So in his deity, Jesus then here is not asking questions that he doesn't already know the answers to. He knows everything already. So what's he doing? What's Jesus doing here? What Jesus is doing is allowing his human side to be taught. The human part of who he is to be taught as a perfect example for us. Jesus shows us what a perfect human being is like. He shows us what a perfect human being is like, and to succeed where all of us have failed, and to give us a perfect example to follow. The Bible says this in 1 Peter 2:21, that to this we have been called, that Christ left you an example that you might follow in his steps. Or to follow in the steps and example of Jesus that he has given us. What Jesus shows us here at the age of 12, I mean, this is an age when most young 12-year-old boys are kind of rebellious, like kind of know-it-alls, testing their own limits. Instead, Jesus shows us human teachability, shows himself being teachable. During World War II, George Orwell, he wrote this essay titled The Lion and the Unicorn. The essay starts out with him saying, as I write, highly civilized human beings are flying overhead trying to kill me. He goes on to chronicle the activities of Hitler and the Nazi regime, and in this essay, what his assessment is, Orwell's assessment at the root of human evil, he says, is unteachability, where people think that they know better and they refuse to listen to a different perspective. And so he ends with this dark conclusion saying, a generation of the unteachable is hanging upon us like a necklace of corpses. The story of the Bible is a story of the human race gone rogue. Human race gone rogue, gone unteachable in this garden, where God gave real wisdom, that don't eat from this poisonous tree, but then the man and the woman, they think that they know better. They're unteachable and they eat from it anyway. What Jesus came to do was to succeed where Adam and Eve failed and where all you and I have failed. As God, he had no need to learn anything. He knew everything already. And yet as a man, he's teachable and he listens to wisdom. Here's the thing. No one ever becomes a Christian or ever grows or matures as a Christian without being teachable. Say that again. No one ever becomes a Christian. No one ever grows or matures as a Christian without being teachable. always, every time happens through teachability. So if you're here today and you're not yet a Christian yet, that's wonderful. We're glad that you've come to check things out. We're a church that really tries to give people time and space to explore things. We're not trying to bend anyone's arm behind their back to force them to become a Christian. There's time and space to figure out if this is what you really think and believe and where God is leading you. But eventually, everyone who becomes a Christian comes to a place where they realize and admit that they've been wrong about some things and are willing to make some changes. Willing to change their mind and their life in light of it. That's the true story of every one of us here in this room that call ourselves Christians. We've come to that point where we realize that we were wrong about those things and have changed our mind and make life decisions to live our life differently in light of that. And it doesn't stop there at becoming a Christian. Really, the whole life of a Christian is where we enter into this journey of teachability. Being a Christian is a journey of teachability. Once we become a Christian, it's not like we arrive and now we know everything and we have it all together and now we're perfect and everybody should just become just like us. Sadly, too often it kind of sounds like that the way that some Christians talk. But the only way that we ever grow or mature or learn as a Christian is through teachability. It's the only way that it happens, where we continually realize things about ourselves. We continually realize things about our world and the way that things that have been off and our minds get changed, and we endeavor then to live our lives differently in light of what we learn. See, how do we do this? Jesus shows us. He gives a perfect example here. Teachability. What's he do? He asks questions. He's asking the questions. What else does he do? He answers. He gives answers. He opens himself up and allows them to ask him questions. Answers honestly and truthfully as possible. This really is how we're formed as people. We know for a fact that our earliest childhood experiences, they have a massive effect on who we become, how we see the world, how we relate to people. All has to do with our family of origin. And in that story, in each of our individual stories, there's key events that happen in our life that imprint themselves onto our consciousness that really form us into who we are. This event in the life of Jesus was undoubtedly one of those events. It was a life-forming event. I mean, age of 12, what would normally be this very traumatic event for a 12-year-old becomes a very revealing event for Jesus and about Jesus. It's an event that reveals Jesus' heart, his character, and his purpose and mission in life. When Jesus' human parents are upset, he gives this profound answer. And then he humbly entrusts himself to their care. Verse 51 makes it really clear that he's not being disobedient or disrespectful to them at all in what he says. It says that he was submissive to them, and he goes with them. In Jesus, what we find is a supreme display of teachability. Now, depending on each of our stories in our formative years, maybe they were good, maybe they were bad, mixed. But for all of us, the answer to embracing our true humanity that God has given us, created in his image, and the life that we long for, that God means for us, it's through teachability, through Jesus' example of teachability. The only way that we get formed into the person that God wants us to be and become, it's through being teachable. So, are you teachable? Or do you think that you know everything? You don't have anything else to learn? I mean, are you open to being wrong about some things? That you might possibly could be wrong? Are you open to that possibility? Are you curious? Do you ask questions? Do you ask questions about who you are and why you are the way that you are? Do you ask questions about God, trying to learn more about him and what he is like? Do you ask questions about the world that we live in, or are you just automatically trying to jump to a conclusion to get the right answer right away? Do you open yourself up to questions and allow people to question you? Are you open? Or are you just kind of like defensive and rigid and closed off?